The world holds its breath as tensions between two nuclear-armed neighbours, India and Pakistan, are escalating. Imagine, in a moment of desperation, Pakistan's military high command gives this unthinkable order: press the nuclear button. Our next story explains how India is one of 4 nations in the world to have a nuclear triad, giving it a devastating second strike. Take a look.
This is the doomsday scenario. In a strategic miscalculation, Pakistan's military command issues an order that no nation should consider. Pakistan activates its nuclear weapons. Within moments, missiles are screaming across the skies. The incoming missiles face India's advanced anti-missile defense systems, a mix of both homegrown and foreign origin systems. First up, they encounter the Prithvi air defense that intercepts ballistic missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere. Next comes the indigenous missile advanced air defense that intercepts and destroys targets in the lower atmospheric layer. This is followed by the Akash missile system that hits aerial targets up to 30 kilometers. And finally, India has the Russian S-400 that can take on a wide range of aerial threats, including ballistic and cruise missiles. Years of meticulous intelligence gathering and advanced satellite surveillance have stripped Pakistan's nuclear infrastructure of any element of secrecy. India's war plans have precisely factored in each silo, mobile launcher and weapons storage facility. Strategically positioned, Pakistan's nuclear missiles are hidden in fortified garrisons and underground facilities. Pakistan's land-based missile silos are located at the Akro garrison, the Gujranwala garrison, the Khuzdar garrison, the Pano Akil garrison and the Sargodha garrison. Pakistan has placed its nuclear-capable bombers at the Minhas Air Base, the Shehbaz Air Base, the Rafiki Air Base and the Masroor Air Base. India is one of only 4 nations with a fully operational nuclear triad, land, air and sea-based nuclear delivery systems. Which means that even if Pakistan uses nuclear weapons first, India's second strike capability, especially its stealth Arihant-class submarines, will guarantee a punishing response, nullifying any nuclear blackmail.
Pakistan, we have seen over the years that if you compare the Pakistan Army and the Indian Army, and if you compare their conventional strength, you will find that the Indian Army is twice as strong as the Pakistan Army, whether in terms of air power, land power, or naval power. So the country which can't match you conventionally has to resort to this nuclear rhetoric. And that is what we are seeing from Pakistan.
History is witness to Pakistan's futile attempt to alter the status quo in 1999 during the Kargil conflict. Its covert incursions were met with a blistering Indian counter-offensive. Leveraging air power and high-altitude warfare, India's military not only recaptured lost ground, but called Pakistan's bluff of having nuclear weapons. Former Indian Defence Minister George Fernandes once put it bluntly, "There will be no Pakistan left when we have responded." He wasn't bluffing. The former Defence Minister was underscoring a truth that still holds. India's second strike capability is devastating, assured and precise. Pakistan may speak of full-spectrum deterrence, but India's response is spectrum-shattering. The first strike is no protection for Islamabad. It will only seal its fate. Bureau Report, WION The World.
And well, for more on this, you were earlier joined by Major General Rajan Kochar, Defence and Strategic Affairs Analyst, and we asked him about the continuous nuclear rhetoric emanating from Pakistan and how he sees the current situation, given how Pakistan does not have a no first use policy.
There is a danger to this because retaliation will also be there from the Indian side, because Indians do not have a first use nuclear policy, no first use. India will only use nuclear weapons in case the adversary starts off with the nuclear onslaught. So I presume that this is what Pakistan is trying to put that nuclear bogey, or you may call it the nuclear threat, on India from getting into a full-fledged conflict with India, because Pakistan does not want India to start a war with Pakistan as of now.
And it's a sentiment that India shares with several other countries as far as the demand for justice is concerned, and for Pakistan to take action against terrorists operating on its very own soil. Last week, this issue reached the UK Parliament, the British Parliament, condemning the terror attack in Kashmir. Conservative Party MP Bob Blackman criticised the Pakistani military and government for condoning such acts. Well, in an exclusive interview with WION today, he said that religion-inspired violence cannot be tolerated and said that the world should stand in solidarity with India. Listen in to this GRAVITAS exclusive interview.
Absolutely dreadful. I mean, the reality is that this group of terrorists were well armed with modern sophisticated weapons. They were well organised, and indeed they were strongly supported in arriving at the site and deliberately targeting Hindu men, and in one case, I believe, a Christian man, but essentially anyone that was non-Muslim was being targeted, and they were only targeting men, and they deliberately shot them in the head. This sort of religious-inspired execution which took place cannot be tolerated, and it's deliberately aimed to cause trouble and tension between people of different religions. That must not be allowed to escalate. Well, what's happening at the moment is obviously governments all over the world are expressing sympathy and condolences to the government of India and to all the victims of this atrocity. However, India has to take action. India needs to both apprehend the terrorists and bring them to justice, but also bring the supporters, the backers of these terrorists to justice as well. And when that happens, it's pretty clear to me that given where the attitude that Pakistan has adopted so far, it's going to take military action to take that, to actually enforce that, there's going to be a problem for the rest of the world then. And I think that governments of all persuasions across the world, particularly in the West, should give full support to India in combating this terrorism and taking whatever measures it's requiring to do in order to stop the terrorism. Yes, I think the first thing is obviously the ideal position is that the terrorists are apprehended and then interrogated, because we all need to hear from those terrorists about who was backing them, who was supporting them, and what assistance was provided and by whom. So that then the individual backers and the supporters of the various different organisations can also be pursued. But what we can say, I think, is very clear, and that is India should have the backing of all right-thinking governments to make sure that the threat of terrorism is removed from their borders, and that those terrorists are not allowed to prevail. And in that regard, obviously the Indian government has my full support in whatever action it needs to take.
Did COVID-19 not come from Wuhan? China claims it originated in the US. A new report from the Chinese Communist Party has accused the US of being the origin of the virus that brought the world to a standstill in 2020. This after multiple investigations over the past few years have indicated a lab in China as the initial source of the deadly virus. China now accuses Washington of evading responsibility. There have been multiple statements made by US President Donald Trump suggesting that the virus leaked from a lab in Wuhan. In an elaborate document, the Chinese government claims that the infectious disease was present in the US earlier than officially determined. The paper quotes, and I quote here, "The US should cease from shifting blame and evading responsibility, stop finding external excuses for its internal malice, and genuinely reflect on and overhaul its public health policies." The paper states the US cannot continue to turn a deaf ear to the numerous questions over its conduct. The paper was released shortly after the White House revamped its COVID.government website, which had previously promoted vaccines, but now discusses true origins of the disease. The updated site provides proof of lab leak theory and highlights how former National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Director Anthony Fauci advocated for the idea that COVID-19 originated naturally. It also mentions former President Joe Biden pardoning Fauci for any offenses against the US he may have committed. The new website outlines that a biological trait found in the virus was not discovered in nature, thus strengthening the lab leak theory. It also emphasizes that Wuhan, where the first COVID-19 cases were identified, is home to China's leading SARS research lab. In the website, the assertion is made that if there was evidence of a natural origin, it would have already surfaced, but it has not. Earlier in January, the Trump administration CIA reported that a lab leak was likely the origin of COVID-19, a theory that had been dismissed as a conspiracy in the pandemic's early days. However, China claims in its paper that a joint study conducted with the World Health Organization found that COVID-19 was most likely transmitted from bats to humans through an intermediary animal. The report also criticizes the US report for not doing more to combat the virus. It says, and I quote here, "The slow and ineffective US response in the early stages of the outbreak set an appalling example for the global community, making the US performance in managing the pandemic the worst among all countries." Instead of confronting this issue, the US government has attempted to shift blame and divert attention by politicizing the tracing of SARS-CoV-2 origins. On Wednesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson also said that the COVID-19 is extremely unlikely to have leaked from a Chinese lab. In an authoritative scientific judgment, he said that it forms the basis of China's stance on origins tracing. The comments made at press conference in Beijing came shortly after China released the white paper titled COVID-19 Prevention, Control and Origins Tracing, China's Actions and Stance.
China has repeatedly articulated its position on the issue of COVID-19 origins tracing. This is a scientific matter, and any judgment on it must be made in a science-based spirit and by scientists. A lab leak is extremely unlikely. This is the authoritative conclusion reached by experts based on science following their field trips to the specific lab and in-depth communication with researchers. This conclusion has been widely acknowledged by the international community, including the scientific community, and serves as the scientific foundation for China's position.
With this, the Chinese government wants future origin tracing efforts to focus on the US. This is not the first time that China has shifted the blame onto the US. Since at least mid-2020, tit-for-tat accusations regarding the virus's origin have been exchanged, especially following China's attempts to hide details of the initial outbreak. Over the years, Chinese officials have promoted theories that suggest the virus emanated or originated outside of China, including unfounded claims related to US military personnel, and emphasized detections of the virus on frozen food imports and ice cream. Remember, China allowed a team of scientists from the WHO into the country on a mission to probe the source of the outbreak. But some members of the team expressed concerns about Chinese officials blocking access to crucial information. And then there's the question of evidence that suggests that the virus was first identified among people who either worked at or visited the market in Wuhan. While there is evidence that the virus jumped to humans from bats through an intermediary animal, the question of where COVID-19 came from remains a mystery even today, perhaps more so than it did 3 years ago. Will we ever truly know the origin of COVID-19? Well, that only time will tell.